Yeah, to my coronation as Queen of Vegan Cheese, and with all the pomp and ceremony. And we're just continuing the consumption of highly processed food, just as a plant based version, rather than
Yeah.
exploring the world of vegetables. And as leaders in the plant based movement or in the future of food movement, really have to think about what is the future we want to create for the food system.
Hi, and welcome back to the Sustain, Change, and Grow podcast, the podcast that shares ideas and inspires change for a better and more sustainable world for all. And I'm your host, Dilara Salakhov. In this episode, I continue the discussion about the food system and vegan diet. I remind you that the current Western food traditions, based to a large extent on consumption of meat and dairy products, lead to a lot of adverse effects, such as up to 25% of total human-generated greenhouse gas emissions, animal suffering due to the way animals are treated in industrial farms, human health problems such as heart diseases and diabetes. Eating animal products in quantities currently consumed is absolutely unsustainable. But how can we get away without yummy cheese, you may ask? Then it's time to talk about vegan cheese. And today I'm talking to an absolutely amazing guest, Miyoko Schinner. Miyoko, to a large extent, reinvented vegan cheese and made it popular in the United States. Miyoko founded and led until 2022 a $260 million brand of vegan cheese called Miyoko Creamery. What is key is that Miyoko is a true defender of animal rights and undertakes multiple actions to remove animals from the food chain. We will also talk about many other topics such as history of vegan diet, how venture capital or financial system in general can influence the food system, barriers for transition to a low-carbon economy in the agriculture, or simply relationship between work, efficiency, diet, and happiness.
Dear Miyoko, it's my great pleasure and honor to have you in my podcast, Sustain, Change, and Grow. And let's start the discussion. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you.
You were named Queen of Vegan Cheese, and your brand, Miyoko brand of vegan cheeses and butter, is known across the US. What is the story that led to such a success?
Yeah, to my coronation as Queen of Vegan Cheese, and with all the pomp and ceremony. No, actually, I'm a longtime vegan. Have been vegan since the 1980s. And the thing that I missed the most was cheese. It took me a long time to sort of give up cheese. So in my early days of veganism, I was what I call a cheating vegan who would once in a while nosh on some brie or camembert or have a slice of pizza because I just couldn't get over it. So, I guess I was like 99% vegan, and then a couple times a year I would cheat. And it took me a long time to figure out substitutes for cheese. I realized that what we are looking for is something that's rich and unctuous, something that's fatty, something that can substitute. So I started playing around with other things that were made from plants that could substitute. And I had a restaurant back in the 1990s in San Francisco where I played around with fermenting soy, and we had a couple of vegan cheeses on the menu. Very simple cheeses. We had an oat-based cheese over a vegan veal parmigiana, which was obviously, but it was this sort of stretchy. It was the first rendition of the liquid mozzarella that we currently have, I think, because it was a liquid cheese that we poured on top, and then it firmed up when it was exposed to heat. We had a fermented tofu cheese that was part of a antipasti platter with vegetables and things like that, and a little pate. And over the years, I kind of got over my addiction to cheese. I thought, okay, I can actually live without it. And then in the 2000s, I was married at the time. I'm divorced now. My ex-husband started buying dairy cheese and bringing it into our home, and saying, I'm tired of being a complete vegan. I need my cheese, and I want to serve it to my friends and guests who come over. And that really rubbed me the wrong way. And so because of that, that was really the impetus that got me back into my kitchen. And I thought, okay, I got to figure this thing out. I'm going to just start working on vegan cheese. And I started reading books on dairy cheese making, and I took a dairy cheese course. I was the only person who didn't actually taste anything. I just wanted to see what the process was about, and then I just started trying to apply those principles to soy milk initially, and then got into other substrates such as cashews, oats, macadamia nuts, whatever. So it was really a combination of like what was going on at the time. There was a raw food movement where they were making sort of nut purees, calling it cheese, usually not fermented. And then just my own frustration with having dairy in my house, which I had managed to keep out for years. That was the beginning anyway. And then it resulted in a cookbook, which I thought nobody would buy, but it became a cult classic. And then people on the internet started calling me the queen of vegan cheese. I did not name myself that, by the way. And there was no ceremony.
From what I see in the United States, you really pioneered the vegan cheese.
Well, definitely, I think I did pioneer the movement. At the time that I started, there were, I think, a couple of Follow Your Heart and Daya were in the marketplace with slices and shreds. And in my humble opinion, having grown up on sort of rich French style cheeses, the European concept of cheese is very different from the American concept of cheese.
The same about wine and food in general.
Yes, that's right. A cheese is something you enjoy with a glass of wine. It's sort of a luxury item, or you have it for dessert after dinner with a piece of fruit. It is something that brings great pleasure, I believe. The American concept of cheese, I think, really changed when processed cheese was invented. And a lot of
Mhm.
Americans grew up without experiencing actual real cheese. There's a lot of Americans who only grew up eating what we jokingly call craft singles. So the prepackaged slices wrapped in plastic that are not even cheese.
That you don't eat raw, you put in the oven.
That's right.
As
And they're not made from in traditional cheese making manners at all. It's a highly processed food, usually made out of whey protein. So it's made out of leftover,
Mhm.
whatever's left over from actual dairy processing, oftentimes. Some of these don't even have actual milk in them. So it's pretty shocking. But a lot of Americans don't have experience with quality cheeses. Before I started Miyoko's, I was making cheese in my home, and I put together a wine and cheese tour of Napa Valley with a friend of mine. And so we decided we would visit various wineries, and I would bring the cheese, and we would sample cheese and wine. And this was like a completely new concept. No one had ever done that before in the United States. And so back then, I was making a lot of mold ripened cheeses, like a Roquefort using Penicillium roqueforti or Penicillium candidum, so bloomy rinds like Camembert and Brie. And so I made these cheeses and I took them up on the wine tour. And there were these young vegans who tasted my vegan version of Camembert with the bloomy rind on the outside, and they go, "Ooh, this is gross. What is this?" And there was a German lad there who's like, "Oh my God, this is so amazing. This tastes just like Camembert." And so it really, really showed the discrepancy. These young American girls who thought this was disgusting had never had fine cheese before. They had grown up eating maybe cheddar, but mostly, just prepackaged processed cheese. So that's a large swath of the American population. It's shocking to Europeans, but if you go to an American supermarket, you will see walls and walls and walls of prepackaged cheese slices and shreds hanging. Like literally many linear meters of prepackaged cheese slices. And then the fancy cheeses are in a small section somewhere else. So,
Mhm.
Americans really do not have, I hate to say it. I mean, this is the land of hamburgers and processed cheese. It's not a country with a cultivated palate. So I'm
Mhm.
sorry to criticize my fellow Americans, but a lot of Americans really didn't grow up with real food, with fresh vegetables and they just grew up eating things out of packages. So they have
Hmm.
not their palates react to salt and sugar, and they don't react to the subtleties of real food. And it's really
Right.
sad. But this is the so-called, well, when I say it's really sad, that's exactly what I mean. SAD is stands for the Standard American Diet. So it's an acronym for the Standard American Diet, and the SAD diet is very, very sad, and that is the typical American way of eating.
Hmm.
Which is why I think we've invented in America, as we go into the plant-based movement, we've created all these foods like burgers and chicken nuggets, and we're just continuing the consumption of highly processed food just as a plant-based version, rather than
Yeah.
exploring the world of vegetables and legumes and nuts and seeds and a more natural way of eating.
You're right. So American culture and style, it's more about efficiency and
Yes.
minimalism. It's not about the long-standing tradition of food or
So
fine dining or even buildings and etc. So you can see it everywhere. So
yes.
and food is just one example.
Hmm. Yep. But food is something that touches our lives 3 times a day or more.
And our health as well.
And so yeah, so it's really, really central. And,
Mm.
we, as leaders in the plant-based movement or in the future of food movement, really have to think about what is the future we want to create for the food system? How do we make it better all around? Do we just substitute for what we've been eating for the last 50 years and just make plant-based versions, or do we try to do something better?
Yeah, and that's what you call like alternative meats or lab-grown meats. That's the substitutes of what the people have been eating. That's what you mean?
Yeah, so a lot of that is what the plant-based movement or the food tech movement is working on.
Hmm.
They're just trying to substitute one for one what the American public has been eating for the last 40, 50 years. Since highly processed foods came to be. And so it's like, let's just substitute and we'll be fine. And I'm not sure I 100% agree with that.
Right. So it's really time to think of the future we want to see, and
Yes,
maybe to bring some more taste and flavors and healthiness in the new food system.
yes,
That's what
yes,
we are trying to create.
yes, exactly. Yes.
In Europe, they do have this long-standing culture of the food, and part of this culture is meat and cheese. And so, replacing the high-quality products with the vegan cheeses, okay, maybe also high quality, but people are not used to it. Maybe a challenge in itself as well. So, my question: have you experienced with the Europeans who are big lovers of cheese? Have you made them try your vegan cheeses, and what reactions did you get?
Oh, yes, I actually have. And, I go to Europe a couple times a year, mostly to Italy, but I've been to other parts of Europe as well, too. And there are quite a few vegan cheese producers now in Europe that are doing some amazing things. Right in France, you're probably aware of um, Les Nouveaux Affineurs.
Hmm.
And Noor and his team are making some incredible cheeses. There's Casciuficio in Italy that's doing some amazing cheeses. So there are people that are experimenting and I think achieving some pretty high quality cheeses as well as recognition across Europe. It may be a tough nut to crack, but I also want to remind even Europeans that the majority of Europeans did not indulge in cheese and meat on a daily basis 80 to 100 years ago, not even 60 years ago. In almost every culture, I don't know about Russia, I've never been there, but I do know that in places like Italy, until the 1980s, the majority of Italians ate a predominantly plant-based diet most of the time because they were too poor to afford to
Mm.
eat prosciutto and pancetta and gorgonzola.
Yeah.
And so they have a rich tradition of dishes based on legumes and beans and vegetables, and that was their daily diet. And then, once or twice a month, they would be able to eat a little bit of cheese or meat, or maybe cheese a little bit more frequently. It was not a huge part of their diet, and that is the case in most of the world. Humans are a very myopic species where we assume that the way we live today is the way we've always lived. The way we eat
Hmm.
today is the way we've always eaten. And the fact is, it's not true. And I think we have to pay homage to our traditions. We have to realize that we have a rich tradition of plant-based foods in every country already. And what would be wrong with rediscovering that and celebrating that? We don't even, to save the world from climate change, we don't even need to invent new foods. We can just eat the way we ate 80 years ago, 100 years ago. That would take care of the problem. But no one thinks that way because there's no money in that. You can't make money if everybody just goes back and eats a traditional diet. You have to keep moving forward and innovating, etc. So I'm not against innovation. I love innovation, but I'm just pointing out that we are being myopic. We're not considering historical developments in and evolution of food, and we're assuming that we can only build on today rather than building on tradition or history.
So you mentioned something about no money and the requirements for innovation. Are you also hinting somewhat for the growth theories that we are requesting, like more money, more profit,
Scale.
more growth?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the other thing is, I think that's very American driven. We live in a culture where there has to be economic growth at all times. And we
Hmm.
assume that economic growth is the most, we just assume that that's the right thing to do. Economic growth doesn't necessarily mean growth of economic equity for people. And we're obviously seeing in the United States that the growth of GDP does not necessarily translate into
Well-being.
that's right, into well-being of most people. It's actually just the contrary.
Exactly.
I'm not saying, oh no, we need to go back to Marxism, but we do need to really think about, instead of GDP, gross domestic product, why don't we think about gross domestic happiness,
Hmm.
GDH? Why don't we think about how do we grow the economic equity and happiness for all? And maybe it's not necessarily tied to scale, because all we're looking at is dollars and cents at the end of the day. One of the things that I find inspirational when I go to Europe is it seems to me, and this may be not founded in any fact, seems to me there are stronger regional economies, meaning in every region, I find little small producers that you only see like on supermarket shelves in that region, and you don't see them nationwide.
Hmm.
Um, they produce enough to distribute to their region, whether it's olive oil or pasta or or legumes. They produce enough to sell to the markets in their region. In the United States, that doesn't work. You have to produce enough that you can sell nationwide, and or you're not going, it's just too hard to survive in some ways. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, you could be a regional producer and you could make a living. You can't
Hmm.
anymore. The demand is, you got to scale and get to, you know um,
Is it the demand from investors?
it's a lot of
Or
it's being driven by investors because they put money in so that they can take money out, and you have to get to a certain scale before that can happen.
Mhm.
And what that creates is an economy where there's a Target and Walmart. You see the same stores wherever you go. There is no diversity anymore. You see the same producers everywhere. When you travel through Europe, you find small producers in every region, and it's kind of exciting. It's like I can only get this specialty chickpea in Umbria. They don't grow it anywhere else. I mean, that's pretty exciting. Or, I can only get this one jam in this area or something like that. It's exciting to be able to discover new things when you travel.
The culinary tourism.
Yes, culinary tourism. Yes, it's exciting. Maybe not as exciting for the locals who have to eat the same things all the time. I don't know.
Most people are very proud of their regions, from what I
They're
know.
very proud of their region, and that's something I found in every European region I've ever been to. The producers there are like, "We make the best. We're better than every other region." And there is this pride and this passion, and I don't see that in the United States, I'm sorry.
Hmm.
I just don't see that sort of pride and passion. It's the pride and passion is like it comes from, "We raised $20 million. Yay, we're successful now." And it seems to be tied to how much money is raised and how much growth they've achieved. Sometimes it's not even about revenues, it's really just about how much funding they've received. Uh,
Hmm.
and in Europe, it seems like people are actually proud of the quality of the products they make. So, what you said about America is a country that's designed just for efficiency is exactly right. We're losing our soul.
Mm.
I find it very, very sad in every single way.
Miyoko Creamery, your company, you did just the same, no? Like you had to become US wide. Was it your objective, or it was also again the pressure of the investors? You had to grow.
Well, let me just set. I don't know if you know this, but I'm no longer involved in Miyoko's. We separated a year ago, so I have nothing to do with the company anymore. And so what I can say,
It grew before you left, right? So it grew to that size before you left.
that's right. We were international before I left. So we were in America, Canada, parts of Asia, and South Africa, strangely.
Oh, not Europe.
So we were in tens of thousands of stores. We were before I left. When I initially started, my plan was to have an online business and a small retail shop in the community that I lived in. And so I rented this facility so I could make vegan cheese and butter. I was going to open up this little retail shop and I was designing it. We had the space for it. And then sales just grew out of control. Whole Foods came knocking on our door 3 months after we opened for business. And they said, "We want to carry your product in NorCal in Northern California." And within a year, there were people coming to us saying from all over the country saying, "Hey, we want your product." And so we shifted gears and decided, okay, we're just going to grow this business. And then yes, we took investor dollars, and the writing, when you take investor dollars, the writing is very, very clear that you have to grow, and you get caught up in the moment. So we had
Hmm.
this little tiny facility for making cheese. Within a couple of years, we had outgrown it. We couldn't produce enough. And so that meant we could either stop the growth or we could take more money and expand. So that's kind of how it went. You get caught up in the moment, and it's very exciting, and it's like grow, 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 and you kind of lose track of the original intent or mission sometimes.
Hmm.
And then you streamline because the very first year we were in business, I was making those bloomy rind cheeses that I'm talking about, like the Camembert and Brie, and we sold blue cheese twice. I made blue cheese as well, and these are much more challenging. You have to have a special facility because the mold can get everywhere. And in order to scale and get bigger, you look for efficiency. You look for what can I make the most of the fastest.
Hmm.
And so that becomes a driving factor behind a lot of things.
That's when you forget the quality.
Yes. And then you buy equipment that can do things and you sacrifice a little quality because for quantity.
Mm.
And I think that was with the packaging equipment that we bought. That's how it goes sometimes. I wouldn't do that now. I have no interest in doing that anymore.
Yeah, but on the other hand, also when you were, putting your soul in producing a very good product, in the defending your idea of stopping the animal use for food production. You do want to share it with the, like, further and further, right? You probably don't want to stop with just your community. You want more people to enjoy it. So it's kind of also sounds pretty natural. It doesn't immediately sound very evil, just grows, just money, etc. It sounds like, yeah, like a good idea. Why not share it further?
Well, that was the thought that I had at the time, was why
Hmm.
not make it available to everywhere, to everyone everywhere, because everybody was writing to us and saying, "When are you going to be in Philadelphia? When are you going to be in Canada?" And so, the thought was, by growing, we can reach more people, help more people transition, etc. So I understand that, but the other model could be, what if instead of, you know, one company becoming the biggest, what if there
Hmm.
were, I don't know, um, a small vegan cheese producer in every region providing for their community? Like, what, just like in Italy, there are different pasta producers in every region. Like, what
Hmm.
if there were different vegan cheese producers in every region? And they all stay relatively, small enough that they can sell to their community, they can make a living,
Innovate.
they can innovate, but they don't have to be the biggest and the best. They can
Mm.
all be. Now we've got real competition, we've got thriving economies in different regions. What is wrong with that model? What's wrong with that is that it doesn't allow venture capitalists, private equity, to make as much money as they want. That's the problem. And in the old days, a small business could get loans much more easily than they can today. But no one wants debt on their books anymore.
That's interesting what you're saying, because so I work in finance, and we always question, how can we make venture capital more available in Europe? How can we bring more equity funding in Europe? Because Europe is mostly funded by bank loans, and that doesn't take more risk, so it's actually accepts only less risky projects, and so it's difficult to finance innovation in Europe. So,
Hmm.
and it's also difficult to grow a business in Europe. So, while in the US, the story is the opposite. And it's interesting how you're coming to this question from the opposite side, actually, that the same venture capital, which is easy in the US, drives out local producers. Everybody has to grow to bring more money, to attract more investors, etc.
It's
Uh,
exactly right. You nailed it. I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, one of the reasons that um, Europe has maintained regional economies is because it is dependent on bank loans, on debt. And that the American economy was like that too. If you think back to earlier in the 20th century, mid 20th century, to the 90s or so, until really the big tech boom, the dot-com boom and all of that, when all the investments in tech started, most small businesses got their start talking to their local bank officer and getting a loan. And if you look at today, you see a much bigger disparity um, in wealth than ever, because um, b- access to venture capital is limited to only those with the most innovative ideas,
mhm.
which means that only a handful get the money to scale, and then they get so big, which means that a lot of people get no money and they end up struggling. And so we have more, I think, we have an unprecedented rate of poverty and homelessness, and people just can't make ends meet in the United States anymore. The middle class is shrinking.
Yeah.
The middle class was thriving in the 1960s and 70s. We had a huge middle class and very few truly wealthy people. Today, it's just the opposite. We have, the one percenters that are richer than ever. The middle class is really, really shrinking, and they're struggling to make ends meet because of inflation, the cost of housing predominantly. We have something called a living wage that you never even heard about 40, 50 years ago. A new term that was coined basically to say this is how much you need to make in order to survive in this region. And there are so many people that don't make a living wage anymore. Yeah, if you're only talking about economic growth, then venture capital is a great way to go. But if you're talking about the growth of happiness, the growth of equity, then venture capital can be very harmful. And we have to stop assuming that it's the solution. We have to stop. I mean, most people just assume that it is the solution and it's a good thing. That,
Hmm.
funding innovation is a good thing. And no one questions it. No one questions what does it even mean to fund innovation? What does innovation even mean? For example, rediscovering tradition and finding solutions that we already have. Why isn't that considered innovation? There's a lot of assumptions made. I do not feel people think deeply about this. People are followers, and everyone just repeats the same thing. And most people do not really think deeply about how do we really make change in the world. I'm like, the venture capitalists that are funding food tech, do they really care about changing the food system and saving the world? Or are they really only thinking about making money? Because if they really thought about saving the world, um, the money really shouldn't be going to innovation. It should be going to a massive checkoff program, running massive marketing campaigns to create awareness, to convince the American public to stop eating a certain way, just like the Got Milk campaign, or beef. It's what's for dinner. I mean, Americans believe in Trump. They are so easily, I hate to say it, they don't think very deeply. The large percentage of Americans are not deep thinkers, and they just believe whatever you tell them. We need to get that message out there of what's happening to the world right now with climate change and animal suffering. And if it's done in a really, really smart way, we can create actual demand for these products. But as we know right now, supply has exceeded demand for these so-called innovative products.
Hmm.
And they're not doing well as a result.
But so, with your products and with your experience of the 20 years, have you seen more people getting into the vegan diet?
According to statistics that people who are vegan are constantly touting on LinkedIn, we have the same number of vegans as we did 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I think that's false because 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I didn't know any vegans. And yeah, I don't think it's just the awareness on the internet, but wherever I go today, in my community, outside of my community, talking to non-vegans, I am meeting more. I mean, it just seems like there's so much more awareness about veganism, and more people are becoming vegan. And everyone is telling me, "Oh, my son just went vegan," or, "My sister is vegan now," or, "I'm thinking about going vegan." So I hear that. So yes, I think it's becoming very, very normal. I think there's a lot of vegans now. What the true percentage is, I don't think we really know. But I think it's a movement that is really catching on. And, I think we can inspire further growth if we have some sort of massive campaign.
So you're saying that okay, you hear many people becoming vegan. Actually, this is not something that I see. But what I see is that many people actually very often even opposing to try vegan or vegetarian dishes. So you ask them, okay, just try it, and they like, oh no, it's not going to be good. So and I do see this resistance and abandoning meat, etc. How do you explain it?
Oh, I don't try to. I just make them food. I just tell them, "Oh, this is what we're having. We're going to have we're going to have a Japanese dinner tonight or an Italian dinner tonight," or I invite people over and I just make them food. There just doesn't happen to be any meat in it, and nobody notices. And so, if you, I mean, that's the way to do it, is just make delicious food and no one's going to ever complain. I've
Mhm.
had ranchers come to my dinners. I've had people in my area that work in this in the arena, and they go, "Oh my God, this is fantastic." Learn to be a good cook, get back in the kitchen. Stop trying to substitute meat for meat. Know that people have been eating plant-based foods for thousands of years. I don't know a whole lot about Russian food, but I'm sure if you think back 100 years, most Russians weren't living on tons of meat and cheese because, for example, artificial insemination didn't exist, which meant if the cow didn't get pregnant, there was no milk. So it was all limited, the amount. And you can see it in actual charts, how much meat and dairy people ate at the turn of the 19th century, the 20th century versus today. At the turn of the 20th century, the average American ate something like 3 to 6 pounds of cheese a year. And today they eat 10 times that. If you think about that, why was that? Because it wasn't that they were vegan, they just didn't have access to it. We didn't have factory farming, we didn't have industrial animal agriculture. You just didn't have it. So what do they eat the rest of the time? They ate beans, they ate vegetables, they ate bread, they ate pasta, they ate grains.
Yeah, my thought is that the one reason why people refuse vegan, vegetarian dishes is because this is associated with poverty. Because for too long they were not having meat, and so they ate only plant based food.
Yes,
And so now they want meat because that's richness, that's,
yes. Meat represents power and wealth.
yeah, and status.
Even though some archaeologists found, they did, I guess, some sort of bone scan. I'm not a scientist, so I can't remember exactly what it was, but they examined the bones of royalty from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and they found that their bone composition showed that they also ate mostly a plant-based diet. That even royalty basically ate just like their population. They still only ate meat uh, once or twice a month during a celebration. So it is kind of a myth that they were all chomping on uh, on meat on a daily basis, while the peasants only ate poor food, poor man's food. But it's all marketing, right? We could make peasant food look really sexy. If we could make it look like this is what royalty ate
Yeah.
if we put the time and effort into it. But there is no return on investment for that except maybe a healthier planet and animals being saved. So at some point, we have to decide, who do we want to have make decisions for the future of the planet? Should it be investors or should it be activists?
What about impact investors?
Well, everybody is an impact investor today. Let's just be honest. I mean, everyone says they're an impact investor. And then you go to their conferences and they're chowing down on meat. And I mean, I've been to so many impact investing conferences where they're serving steak and everyone's happy. And if you ask them if they're vegan or eat a plant-based diet, most of them do not. There's a handful of them that are actually vegan. There's Blue Horizon, Stray Dog Capital. There's a handful that practice what they preach, but most of them who consider themselves impact investors, I'm sorry, but I think you have to walk the talk, and I don't think they do. So I know I'm making enemies by my honesty and transparency, but at some point, I mean, we really are at a desperate point in human history, and the planet is burning up really, really fast. Billions and billions of animals are dying and suffering, and we have to decide what kind of leaders we want to be. Why are we making these decisions? Like, upon what should these decisions be made? And philanthropy is going down the same route as investments.
What do you mean?
There's now this idea that we have to have an ROI on philanthropy as well. We have to be able to have a quantitative analysis of what's the return on every dollar
Hmm.
we spend in philanthropy. And sometimes these things are not as quantifiable. All of this, really once again comes down to propping up the patriarchy, which is based on power and maintaining one status rather than how do we create a world that is harmonious and equitable and actually takes care of people? How do we take care of people's happiness? How do we create economic opportunities for more people?
Interesting that we call vegan products like butter and cheese. I know that in 2020, so you sued the state of California for the right to use butter for vegan products, and actually you won. So, and I was interested in on which grounds you won and why it is important to be able to use these words for vegan products. Like, why it's important to say vegan butter or vegan cheese?
Well, because it's part of language. The word butter has been used to describe plant-based products. Same thing with milk for centuries, especially in other cultures. The word "豆乳" means soy milk in Japanese. "New" is the
Hmm.
word for milk in Japanese. So "bonyu" means mother's milk, and
Hmm.
"豆乳" means soy milk. And these are words that have existed in, or equivalents existed in Asia for thousands, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of years. The West does not own the term that is equivalent to milk. And even in Western languages, we have used words like coconut milk, peanut butter, cocoa butter, coconut butter, etc. for hundreds of years. They're in the dictionary. They have been for a long time. And then a certain industry with interest came along and said, no, only we own these words. And so not only is it a rewrite of etymology and history, it is also an attack on other cultures that have also used those words for hundreds of years. It's as if to negate the existence of such foods in other cultures as well. In some ways, I'll go into it, I call food colonialism, but the West is trying to control how we think about food and what foods we eat in other cultures as well. It's endemic. I mean, there is, I hate to say it, patriarchy, colonialism, its insidious nature has infiltrated every aspect of our culture, including food. And we don't see it, we don't realize it, we don't think about it, but it is there. We cannot allow people to be autonomous. Nobody's confused. So we sued the state of California when they told us we couldn't use the word butter to describe our product. And we sued them. And there were surveys done that showed that people were not confused about the term vegan butter. And not only that, but in a survey that we did where we asked them about dairy butter as well, there was a small amount of confusion for both dairy butter and vegan butter, and they were about the same. There were just as many people confused about
Mm.
the term what butter meant as there were for vegan butter. So
Hmm.
when you actually go out and do a study like that, I mean, that was a very telling study. Anyway, so the judge thought it was absurd. The case was, we won, and the word vegan butter, as you can use the word butter as long as you use a modifier, um, such as vegan or cashew
Mm.
based or whatever.
Hmm. And so I really can't avoid asking this question because I think it's one of the questions that people have in mind about veganism. So, what is the relationship between veganism and health? So, because from the childhood, we keep hearing that we need protein, especially animal based protein, we need to receive vitamins and micro elements. So, does it mean that if one adopts a vegan diet, the person has to have necessary supplements, or is it confirmed that we can get all the necessary nutrients just from the plant-based diet?
Well, I'm not a nutritionist and I'm not a dietitian. So, but everything I've read and heard would indicate that you can get everything you need from plants. Vitamin B12 is one that sometimes they say vegans are insufficient in, but studies have actually shown that many people are lacking in vitamin B12 because it doesn't come from meat, it comes from bacteria. And in the old days, we did not live in such a sterile society. We picked
Mhm.
fruit that might have fallen from the ground and eaten it, and you got your vitamin B12 that way. It comes from soil, the bacteria in soil. And now we live in this sterile, everything is washed and scrubbed, and then we use antibacterial sanitizers and all this stuff, and we're basically killing both good and bad bacteria. And so a lot of people are deficient in vitamin B12. It's not just vegans alone, but of course that publicity that it's the vegan diet that's deficient in vitamin B12 is out there. And then once again, I'm going to say, look, let's just harken back to history. Most of the world was mostly plant-based for most of human history, and they weren't dying of starvation or lacking in protein. They got sick for other reasons, but it wasn't because if they were getting enough calories, they were getting enough protein, and that has been proven time and time again. Protein deficiency is not a disease you ever hear about. People in this
Mhm.
country do not. People in the Western people in developed worlds do not die of protein deficiency. Has anyone ever heard of that? Has anyone heard of the rise in protein deficiency? No. People die of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, which are lifestyle diseases that come from excess in calories, fat, meat consumption, sugar, processed foods, lifestyle choices. But people do not die from protein inadequacy. That's just a complete myth. Protein's in every single food out there. I've been eating a vegan diet for 40 years, and I'm not plant-based diet. My kids were raised vegan initially. Then they went vegetarian, and then they went vegan again by choice. And there are so many vegans out there. So, I mean, it's just false.
Apart from being an entrepreneur and American sense a successful entrepreneur, so you're also very active in with nonprofit organizations. So you have a nonprofit organization, Leaders for Ethics, Animals, and the Planet, and also the Rancho Compassion, so a farmed animal sanctuary in Nicasia, California. How all of this related together?
Well, I'm an animal rights activist at heart. I want to create a world that is founded on the rights of all living beings to live life according to their needs and as they see fit. I don't believe in the commodification of animals in any way, and I want to reverse that trend. One way that I found very, very effective is, when you can connect people with animals, their perception of them changes. If we've seen how people look at dogs and cats. When I was growing up, a lot of people got a dog because they wanted a guard dog to bark and keep away strangers or other people, and they oftentimes tied them up and they were chained all day long. And dogs often lived in dog houses in their backyard. And they were not treated as a family pet, or they were not treated as a member of the family. Things have changed in the last 40, 50 years, 60 years, where dogs now sleep on beds with they're not owners anymore, with their moms or dads. Dogs are a member of the family. So we have already changed how we look at dogs today. But we have to
Mhm.
remember 50, 60 years ago, that is not what the average person thought of dogs. So if we can do that in a matter of two generations with dogs, we can also do that with farm animals. And so having people come to sanctuaries to connect with a pig and rub their belly and realize that a pig also is a very highly sociable animal, to hug a cow, whatever it is, to go on a hike with a goat because goats just want to hang out with you. When they realize that you can actually have a relationship with these animals, and they too are highly social creatures, it changes their perception. And so the role of a sanctuary is not to save as many animals as possible because that's impossible. It's too expensive, and there's billions of animals that need to be saved. You can't save them all. But if we can save a certain number of animals that can become amazing ambassadors to help people recognize that a change needs to be made in how we perceive them, it can be a very, very effective way for animal rights. So I'm a big proponent of sanctuaries, and to use them not as rescue centers, but as outreach centers, where you're constantly bringing people in that are not vegan to connect with them.
Mhm.
So not petting zoos, but really, using that as an educational opportunity. So Rancho Compasión is a farmed animal sanctuary nonprofit that I founded. I live at the sanctuary. It's on my property. I lease it to the organization, and I'm very proud of that. Um, I also co-founded another organization last year called Leaders for Ethics, Animals, and the Planet, LEAP, which is the first alternative to traditional youth agricultural programs that exist in the United States called 4-H and Future Farmers of America. And these are organizations that get youth involved um, in agriculture, um, but also other things, leadership, and kind of harden their hearts towards animal ag. So a lot of times kids will raise an animal like a pig or a cow, and they don't realize what's coming down the pike. What they are doing is raising the animal to learn about animal care. And at the end of the year, they have to take them to the county fair and sell them for slaughter. And a lot of kids are heartbroken. But over the years, they realize that this is the way of the future. This is our food system. And so they grow up in this. And we thought, okay, can we create a program that allows people, kids to learn about leadership and the food system and animals, but they don't have to kill the animal at the end. So
Mhm.
that's a new program that we started, and that's being launched nationwide in the fall at sanctuaries across the country.
So another big question is the agriculture is really at the heart of the transition that the humanity needs to undertake to achieve carbon neutrality and mitigate climate change. And so you also pioneered the program of dairy farm transition. Can you say some words about it and how did it go? Was it successful?
Um, I really can't talk a lot about it. It was a program that I initiated at Miyoko's. I'm not part of it anymore. When I left, there were some negotiations. I think a lot of good work was done there, but I don't know where it stands today. So I can't really say a whole lot about that. But in the meantime, there are others that have done amazing things. There is a woman, I believe, in Switzerland. I don't remember her name right now, but there is a video called Transformation that was made of her by We Animals. And apparently, she has managed to convert quite a few farms to growing crops. She's been very, very successful. I can't, without Googling, I can't remember her name offhand. But I think she's done some commendable work, and others are also working on it. Mercy for Animals is working on it. So I think there's a lot of good work being done there. What I will say is that dairy farmers, cattle ranchers. I live in an agricultural area in California, surrounded by ranches, and I can tell you most people aren't making a ton of money. A lot of farmers and ranchers are, having a hard time um, making ends meet, and they're not 100% in control of their destiny because they don't sell their products to a regional marketplace for what they want to charge. Like in the old days, they sell to consolidators who tell them how much they're going to be paid. And so, statistics on their average earnings shows that most farmers don't make a lot of money, and they have a lot of debt, and the debt is to the consolidators. So they're really not in control of their destinies. In the United States, there are so many farmers that are committing suicide, especially dairy farmers. It's almost It's almost a trend. I mean, there was a huge story that came out in the New York Times about the high rate of suicide among dairy farmers, because they're just in over their heads in debt, and there's no line of sight to being profitable. They're basically indentured servants, to the big consolidators. So this is what big food does, which is another reason that I am against scaling at all costs, because we are driving towards further consolidation and more conglomerates, and we are depriving small producers of um, an opportunity to adjust living.
So, and what you're saying that these farmers they may be open to the transition to grow crops and stop using animals.
Yes, they may be, but in the United States, oftentimes it's impossible because there are so much in debt. And so that's the economic reality in the United States, I think, is very different from Europe. So many farmers in the United States are so in debt to consolidators, even if they want to transition, they may not be able to without economic assistance.
Mhm.
So, they're oftentimes in a huge bind, which is really sad.
So essentially, we do need those impact investors who would provide debt relief and help the transformation.
Well, except for the impact investors are going to expect a return. And, once again, that can be very, very hard. I think we need government programs that provide aid, not necessarily impact investors that demand more of them.
And so you mentioned indeed several times that you are not anymore with Miyoko. And I know from the media that your departure was not very peaceful. So your story sounds a little bit like the story of Steve Jobs, no? That you're the founder, you was the CEO for about 10 years, and then you were just removed. What were the reasons? Is it again that your values of protecting animals and creating products which will help remove animals from the food chain, were again departing from the interests of investors who would be looking more for returns and compromise your values?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for asking that. But I do have to say that we did settle. We did agree to a settlement, and I can't really talk about it. But the only thing I will say is all I can talk about is like who am I, and what are my values, and I think um, I wish the company well. That's all I can say. And I have my own journey, which is going to be devoted to activism. And whatever business venture I get into, whatever I decide to do, will be built on a foundation of activism.
What are your current and future projects or plans or ideas?
Well, so thank you for asking that. So a lot has happened in my life over the last year. It was very public, which, in some ways makes it easier because I can talk about it. There are a lot of people that are like Steve Jobs or me that have gone through similar things that where the stories were not as public, and it made it harder for them in some ways because they can't discuss it. So in some ways, I appreciate what I've been through, but let's just say that it I also went through divorce this year. So it was, I would say, both professionally and personally, it was it was a hard year for me. So I'm just kind of coming out of that right now. So I haven't completely reinvented myself yet. People are all asking, what are you going to do next? And I don't have it all figured out, but I do have a couple of things coming. I have a new book contract for another cookbook that I'm very excited about. So that happened. If I get the manuscript written on time, that will come out in 2025. So I'm excited about that, and it will be about it'll be a vegan creamery book about all things having to do with plant milks, from yogurt to cheese to ice cream to everything that you would make out of different kinds of plant milk. So I'm excited about that book.
Will it cover some history of vegan dairy products, if I can say so?
Yeah, probably a little bit, but I'm really interested in open sourcing and empowering people to make their own products, to make their own food. I think we need to all get away from packaged foods and get back into our kitchens. So when I first wrote Artisan Vegan Cheese, which was the book that uh, launched 1,000 cheese companies, I like to joke. Back in 2012, 2 years before I started Miyoko's, I disclosed, I open sourced how to make vegan cheese, making fermented vegan cheese. And so I'm kind of going back to that. I have a lot of new ideas. I've been working on a lot of new recipes, and I want to share them with the world. A lot of new processes, and I'm going to be open sourcing that and sharing that with the world in my book. So that's exciting for me. I'm also working on some ideas on a lifestyle brand, a vegan lifestyle brand, and really trying to make veganism give people a reason to want to go vegan rather than just selling products. So I think you need both. You have to give people a reason to want to go vegan, and then you have to have the products that make it easier for them.
Mm.
But we have approached everything from a market-based solutions. The industry has just put money into market-based solutions, thinking all we have to do is just change what's sold on the shelf, and then that's all we need to do. And we're finding that's insufficient. We have to give people a reason to want to try those products, and we haven't done a very good job. So I feel like that is the first part of the equation, and that's something I'm working on. I don't have it nailed down. I'm talking to various people because I want to form if I start a new company, I want people that are excited about that. So, if
Mm.
any listener out there wants to get involved, talk to me. I have just very rough formed ideas. It's a napkin sketch at this point. And in the meantime, just for fun, I also started a little YouTube channel called The Vegan Good Life with Miyoko. So I just upload a scrappy episode once every couple of weeks. I'll be leading more vegan tours also. I'm going back to Italy leading a vegan culinary tour in September. I'm going to be doing vegan cooking classes in Italy next year as well. 3 weeks of that. Yeah, I love going to Europe. I love Italy in particular. I'm studying Italian. Yeah, that's more of the good life.
Actually, I just wanted to mention that I really love your YouTube videos. I found them super encouraging, and I have tried for the moment only oat milk, but next on the list is the to try the yogurt, oat yogurt, or whatever the vegan yogurt. I'm probably like something 90% vegan, vegetarian. Some products which is difficult to get rid of. I eat them from time to time. Desserts is a big deal. And just today I saw your video about the crepe or the French pancakes, and I saw, and it's just so easy. So this is the next thing that I'm trying to. Well, I will try over the weekend when I have a bit more time. Yeah, I'm just amazed how easy it is. Because my usual problem is that, oh, it's difficult. I need too many ingredients. I don't know where to start. And here it is, like it's super easy. I really recommend everybody just to try it.
Thank you for watching. Yeah, so you know, I my approach to cooking and making videos isn't to wow people. I don't care if people look at me and go, "Oh my gosh, she's so amazing." That's not it. I want people to feel comfortable. I want people to realize that it's achievable, it's accessible. You can do it. And that's, so there's a lot of amazing vegan chefs in the market, on YouTube, and you watch them, and sometimes as a viewer you think, oh my god, they can do it because they're so amazing, but I could never do it. And I'm just the opposite. It's like, hey, I spilt this, I burnt this, whoops, I make mistakes in the kitchen, and that's okay, because at the end of the day I can still make a good product, and so can you. And I just want to encourage people to get back in the kitchen and roll up their sleeves and make a mess, because it's fun, it's tasty, and it's easy.
Yeah, and it's homemade and healthy.
Yes.
And the reason why I started doing oat milk is because, okay, I don't drink milk. but I like using it for tea or some other dishes. And I was really disturbed by all the waste that we produce.
Yes,
And then I realized that making oat milk at home is just so easy. It takes you literally just maybe 5 minutes, and that's it. And then you have your homemade milk, oat milk, which is cheaper, no additives, and no waste.
that's
Perfect.
right. It's exactly true. I mean, most things are like that. And, my goal really with my lifestyle brand, my cookbook, and my YouTube channel is to get more people, to empower more people to feel like they can take food into their own hands and to rely less on packaged solutions. I mean, we have to reduce waste.
Mm.
And, the more we put into packaged solutions, we're creating more waste. What if we could reverse some of that? What if we just stop celebrating consumerism? And yeah, well, maybe the GDP doesn't grow as much, but what if, happiness grew? What if self-empowerment grew? What if health grew? Sustainability grew? Because we're becoming less consumers and more self-producers.
Yeah. And actually, as one other vegan chief on my podcast said, so like we became so much attached to these packaged products and all the junk food because of the speed and the always search for efficiency. So
Yes,
if we slow down, and that's what you're saying, if we slow down, we cook at home, we enjoy sharing the meals, etc., we will naturally turn to better food.
that's exactly right. That is exactly right. Instead, a whole society based on efficiency leads people to get what's called grab and go food,
Mm.
eat in front of their computer, eat in their car. Conversations, real life conversations are happening less and less. And I went out to dinner a couple nights ago with another person in the industry, a young person who just shut down his business. But he was in the alt protein sector, and he's in his 30s. And we went out to dinner together, and he was just saying that so many people in his generation are lonelier than ever, because they don't have actual conversations. They don't actually meet face to face as much as they used to. We don't celebrate life across the dinner table anymore. We see food as merely something that you eat because you're hungry at your desk or somewhere else, and then you get back to the real world. You get back to the real work, which is work. And we've forgotten that. Why are we living? Why, what about community? He was saying that people didn't have a sense of community and they were lonely. So, is that the world we want to create? Where communities break down, where families break down, where people are all living in isolation? I don't know if that's certainly not what I want. Yeah, and so one of the happiest things for me since my departure from Miyoko's is that I have spent a lot more time with people. I get together with people all the time now. I'm going out for drinks with somebody tonight. I've never met them in person. I've only talked to them over Zoom or on the phone, and I'm going to meet this person tonight for the first time and go out for drinks. I went out to a movie last night with a friend. 2 nights ago, I had dinner with somebody. I'm actually having real life, in person meetings with people more frequently and feeling more connected.
That's what you need for your vegan lifestyle.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that it's really vegan lifestyle brand isn't just about vegan products. It's about the meaning of life, which is about community. It's about bringing people together. You have to get people to feel like they all belong to something, that they're not all alone, that there's somebody watching their back. And we don't feel that way anymore.
I think that there are certain differences between the US and Europe
Yes.
and Russia. So, like, there are cultural differences. And then you
Huge.
take Asia and Africa, and everywhere it will be different. US, in some sense, it's probably an extreme.
The US is an absolute extreme. This is a sick country. I'm going to say it. My fellow Americans can hate me for saying that. We're also self-absorbed, and we think that the way we are here in America is how everyone else is everywhere else. and we impose our values on the rest of the world. And part of this is it's a symptom of a society that doesn't travel very much outside of the giant island of the United States, and doesn't realize that people in other parts of the world think differently. I mean, most people in America do not speak multiple languages, which means that without speaking another language, it's hard to understand how another culture thinks. We are a country that lives in isolation and thinks America, the land of the great, well, the greatest country in the world. People grow up thinking that. It's very sad because we don't feel that we belong. We are a part of the world. We believe we are the world.
Oh, above the world.
Above the world, yes, but they travel abroad and impose their values on the world. I saw it when I was living in Japan. I see it in Europe. Um, and it's great that some countries are resisting American infiltration. I hate to be honest, but I mean, it's a relief to go to places and to travel to Italy and not see a Starbucks in every street corner. I mean, yeah, they exist, but not everywhere.
Hmm.
It's
Do many Americans share your views? Like, do they see themselves this way?
no, no, most Americans. Well, I think a lot of Americans do. I mean, my circle of friends are, I think, much more aware, much more well traveled. Are some of them are talking about becoming expats and moving to Europe or Asia. My circle is different, but a lot of people in America, they are not curious. I mean, I have met Americans who've never left their state. When I've traveled to other places, we stayed in an Airbnb in Ohio, and no, it was a B&B, not an Airbnb. And so there were other guests, and at breakfast, I had a conversation with everyone sitting there. They were all just from another town. They had never, I mean, everyone at that table, no one had ever been out of state before. It was shocking to me.
It says everything. But it's only people who travel who can realize it. Because once you're living in a box, you don't know you're living in a box.
You
Like,
don't, you
because you
don't.
think that's the world.
That
So
is the
once
world.
you go outside, that's
Right.
when you
And it's
realize it.
interesting, television in the United States. Now, I know a lot of people don't, I don't watch TV anymore. I just stream shows that I like. But when I lived in Japan, the average Japanese was, I would say the average European, much more educated about what's going on in the world overall. Because whether it's Europe or Asia, the news is world news is disseminated. So you learn about what's going on in the United States, you learn about what's going on in other countries. You watch American news, and you hear about what's going on in America. You don't know about. I mean, it's very hard to get world news in America unless you read the New York Times and go to the world news section. But it's not something you're going to hear on CBS on a regular basis. It's just not it. We're focused on ourselves. And so the average American, I would say, is far less educated about what's going on in the world. Obviously, big things like, Ukraine, Russia, I mean, that obviously is going to be out there in the news, but very little else.
Usually, I ask my guests two most inspiring books. Well, since you're an author yourself, maybe I can ask you which books you recommend, how people can start being vegan.
Okay, that's a hard question. I guess I mean, from my book, if you're going to start with any book, start with the Homemade Vegan Pantry. The Homemade Vegan Pantry is probably my most comprehensive book, and it's really about taking power back in your kitchen and learning how to make things from scratch, and learning how easy it is to make things that you only thought you could buy at the supermarket. For example, ketchup. How easy is it to make ketchup? It's three ingredients, and you can make it in your kitchen in about 30 seconds.
Oh, I remember my mom doing it, but it was taking hours and hours.
Well, that's because there's an easy way to do it. So, I mean, that is, that's something like that. But whether you want to learn how to make bread or yogurt or vegan cheese or ketchup or something like having a pancake mix on hand so that you can make pancakes any day of the week. So it's a sort of a all-purpose book on how to rely less on packaged foods and make your own stuff. So I would start with that, the Homemade Vegan Pantry. And in terms of books, this is a very old, a Russian book. One of my favorite books of all time is War and Peace by Tolstoy.
Oh,
And it is about life in general and questioning everything, where you are in life, what your hopes and dreams are, and then a collection of dialogues, and that would be the dialogues of Plato. And that would be probably the starting place. If you're going to read anything, start there. Learn to question, learn to ask, dig deeper.
is there a good book about the vegan tradition? Like maybe cross country, worldwide, how people eat vegan?
How people eat vegan worldwide?
Yeah, like the traditions, cultural traditions.
I don't know that there is, but I think one needs to be written. And I don't think anyone's talking about it. I know I'm talking about it, so maybe I should write that book.
Because you mentioned it several times, like, and also when preparing for the interview, I was looking like who really invented this vegan cheese. Because you were called the queen, I was thinking maybe you were the first one. No, I realized that it was in China in the 16th century that
Right.
they had vegan cheese.
Yes.
But this is fascinating.
Yeah, no, I mean people we're just now acting like this is the first time we ever ate this way, and it's not true. We've been eating like
Exactly.
this for most of human history. And maybe someone needs to write a book on that. And I'm not aware of that, but I don't know, maybe I'll write on that. I probably would need someone to help me research the history better.
Yeah,
So,
some historian,
yeah,
like food historian.
yeah, maybe I need to get together with a food historian and
Because there was something else that I also heard from your interview with somebody else that Japan was vegan for some time.
yes. So under royal decree, it was a Buddhist country. There, the emperor was vegan, and it was under royal decree to be vegan for almost 800 years. So you were not allowed to eat a four-legged creature. But not everyone abided by it. Obviously, people coastally ate fish occasionally, or you'd eat a bird or something. But it
Mhm.
was predominantly a vegan country.
So in Japan, in Japanese culture, you should have a long-standing tradition of vegan food.
There is a long-standing tradition, but it's only continued in temples, and it's called Shojin Ryori. Yeah.
This is amazing. So this
Hmm.
should be out
It should be
to
out.
remind
In other words,
people.
we already have the answers. We don't need to reinvent it.
Exactly.
Yes, we just need to make it sexy and exciting.
We remember what we had in the last 60 years, but that's not how we lived, as you say.
No, that's it. It's exactly right.
Thank you very much for this conversation, Miyoko.
Thank
I
you so
really
much.
wish you the best for your projects. And actually, also, you mentioned that if somebody is interested in your vegan lifestyle brand, they can get in touch with you. How should they get in touch?
Probably on LinkedIn. Message me on LinkedIn. That would be one way to do it.
So I will put all these links in the description for the episode so they will be able to get in touch.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation.
That was an amazingly rich exchange with Miyoko. Miyoko's energy, creativity, and dedication to the animal cause are absolutely fascinating. What I loved particularly about Miyoko's approach is that where other people would find an opportunity to make money, such as patenting methodology to produce vegan cheese and then sell it, Miyoko gives it away absolutely generously and encourages other people to use her recipes to start their own business to produce vegan cheese. I find this a rare and really admirable quality. This is also so true that over the last 60 years or so, our societies have sacrificed quality food and time for cooking this food ourselves to packaged and fast food for the sake of speed and efficiency. To do what? To work longer hours, mostly in the office. This way, we not only outsourced the efforts of cooking, we also outsourced the decision making on the quality of food we consume. And every living being in this chain has got hurt: animals, farmers, and us, consumers. If you're interested in giving a hand to Miyoko on creation of vegan style brand, feel free to reach out to her in LinkedIn. You will find all the details in the episode description. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it inspiring. With any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email me at scgrowpodcast in one word at gmail.com. Until next episode, stay green, stay inspired. Bye bye.